Hi, I'm Jake, the designer at BulletTrain. Today we're going to take a look at the BulletTrain Express keyboard platform and its advanced ergonomic benefits. It's hard to believe it's been 6 years since I first introduced the Express, and it's amazing to see how much it's evolved. If you're not familiar with the Express, you can learn much more by visiting bullettrain.com. Ergonomics are really important, and unfortunately, most people don't know much about the subject. Ergonomics can simply be defined as the economics of motion. The big problem is desktop keyboards, mice, and trackpads are invisibly destroying people's wrists and forearms, which often result in repetitive stress injuries, including tendinitis and carpal tunnel syndrome. This serious issue is reaching epidemic proportions. Just to be clear, I'm not a doctor and I'm not offering medical advice. I'm a designer who's used computers for 40 years, and unfortunately, I actually developed carpal tunnel syndrome in my right arm 15 years ago, and it really freaked me out. The pain was so unbearable, I became obsessed with finding a cure, and fortunately I did. The supreme irony is the cure was hiding in plain sight for decades in front of everybody. The solution I discovered is using a laptop keyboard form factor for the desktop. Let me say it again. The solution is using a laptop keyboard form factor for the desktop computer. What makes it so ergonomic? Basically, the fact that it elevates and comfortably supports your wrists and keeps them in the perfect position for typing and using the trackpad. I want you to conduct a quick experiment with me to illustrate how uncomfortable using a mouse can be. As I speak, try holding your arm out to the side like you're holding an invisible mouse for 60 seconds. Even if you don't have a mouse, you'll see how uncomfortable it is. No, seriously, try it. Hold your hand out here for 60 seconds and you'll see what I'm talking about. This can get very tiresome after just a few minutes, and people use their computers like this for countless hours on end. Holding your arm and wrist like this when using a mouse perpetuates an ergonomic imbalance and introduces what we call a false economy of motion. Every time you go from using the mouse to typing on a keyboard, you have to constantly move your hand back and forth to the keyboard, which unnecessarily wastes energy and increases fatigue. We call this specific wasted movement ping-ponging. Even when just using a mouse with infrequent typing, the energy required to hold your arm out in place hovering over the mouse is extremely wasteful and uncomfortable. So if you've held your hand out as I asked you to do, you'll see what I'm talking about. You know what? This thing is a huge waste of energy. Let's just get rid of it. Keyboards tend to make you adapt to them, but shouldn't it be the other way around? Not only do your hands and wrists experience strain when anchored on your desktop, your shoulders and elbows also tense up to operate hardware on the flat surface. Additionally, shifting side to side to operate the mouse or trackpad next to the keyboard causes unnecessary back and shoulder strain. Everybody knows Apple was the first to ship a mouse with a Mac in 1984. In 1991, Apple introduced their first laptop named PowerBook, which incorporated an ergonomic trackball that was ultimately replaced in 1994 when Apple introduced the world to the trackpad interface on a laptop, and of course it was centered in front of the keyboard. If you've used a portable computer this millennium, you're familiar with a trackpad centered in front of the keyboard. And why would it be anywhere else? In 1997, Apple introduced the 20th anniversary Mac, which in an ironic twist of fate included a laptop keyboard form factor with a trackpad front and center. The irony, of course, is the Express, which came along more than a decade later, offered a similar form factor, which is that of a laptop keyboard. In other words, in 1997, the most state-of-the-art Mac made to date used a laptop keyboard form factor on the desktop. In 2000, after Steve Jobs returned to Apple, the mouse was back on center stage and the all-in-one desktop keyboard form factor was forgotten in the history books. In 2010, Apple came out with the wireless keyboard and Magic Trackpad in order to bring the highly useful and popular trackpad gestures from the MacBook laptop to the desktop. Until then, basically everyone who used a computer got used to or became dependent on the mouse. So when Apple introduced the Magic Trackpad, most people didn't even understand what it was or how it worked, because they had never seen a trackpad anywhere but in front of a laptop keyboard. The strange thing is, Apple somehow expected customers to use the trackpad side by side with the keyboard. When you think about it, it makes no sense. Not to mention, we're stuck with the same false economy of motion as with a mouse. In 2010, the day the wireless keyboard and Magic Trackpad were first available, I went to the Apple store on Chestnut Street in San Francisco to try them out. I have to admit, I was very pessimistic about the trackpad because I thought it was too good to be true. I conducted an interesting experiment by placing the trackpad in front of and underneath the keyboard, and took my iPhone and placed it under the trackpad to simulate a desktop keyboard. I started using this pairing like a laptop keyboard and was completely blown away by how accurately it mimicked a MacBook keyboard, gestures, scrolling, and all. It was at that moment I realized I had to bring the eXpress to market. I went to my machine shop and made this actual prototype. And I took the trackpad and put it in, and took the keyboard and put it in, and started using it with my iMac. And I was completely gobsmacked, stunned, and stupefied. I couldn't believe how great it was. It seemed identical to my MacBook, with one exception. The increased size of the trackpad made it even easier to scroll and use all kinds of gestures like, pinching and zooming. I experimented with many other form factors, including the second prototype, and I ultimately settled on this version, which I rushed to market with, and thus the first BulletTrain Express keyboard platform was born. In 2012, BulletTrain introduced an all-new injection-molded BulletTrain Express at the CES trade show. The significantly updated model was made for the mass market. Unlike its aluminum predecessor, the new model was much lighter in weight and wouldn't bite you on a cold day like aluminum did. Injection molding allowed us to do all sorts of things we couldn't do with aluminum, like countersink the trackpad into the platform, as well as adding a radius to all the edges. This model was a huge success. We hoped for a long time Apple would eventually update the keyboard and trackpad, and we were surprised it took so long. That being said, the day Apple announced the Magic Trackpad 2 and Magic Keyboard, we immediately began designing the third generation Express. We took all the learning and knowledge we gained from the first and second generation Expresses and incorporated it into the third generation Express. We were aiming really high, and by the time the dust settled with our prototypes, even we were stunned with how magnificently it turned out. Not only was it even more ergonomic and comfortable, but it was a true minimalist masterpiece. The Express looks like no other desktop keyboard ever made, yet its form factor is remarkably familiar, as it is in many ways similar to a laptop keyboard form factor. You can't help but look at it as a minimalist masterpiece or a beautiful piece of modern art that would look fantastic on any minimalist desktop. But the reality is that it's an extremely ergonomic, comfortable keyboard. Not only does the Express unify the Apple keyboard and trackpad into one cohesive platform for easier handling when assembled, it feels like one-piece unibody construction. This is a great example of the whole being far greater than the sum of its parts. The trackpad is finally located where it belongs, centered in front of the keyboard, just like on a MacBook. The built-in ergonomic wrist rests of the Express save your hands and wrists from unnecessary strain by elevating your hands and offering superb wrist support above the desktop surface. The Express corrects the false economy of motion of ping-ponging between a keyboard and trackpad or mouse, saving your wrists, arms, shoulders, and back from long-term discomfort. The arrangement of the keyboard and trackpad in the Express is so efficient, it's like trading in a BMW that gets 23 miles per gallon for a Tesla that gets the equivalent of 100 miles per gallon. Remember, ergonomics is about the economy of motion, and anything you can do to get rid of this constant ping-ponging back and forth and replace it with simple gestures like this is going to make your life and your wrists much better. Unlike other keyboards which make you adapt to them, the Express goes with you so you can use it just about anywhere, not only on your desktop, but also on your lap, on the couch, or even standing up. The Express gives you convenient access to lightning charge ports and power switches on both the keyboard and trackpad. The BulletTrain design team left nothing to chance with this amazing design. Plus, installing or removing your keyboard and trackpad from the 3rd generation Express is extremely simple. Not that you'll ever need to remove them. Basically, if all desktops were operated with a BulletTrain Express, it would protect people's wrists and eliminate the learning curve altogether. In other words, if you know how to use a MacBook or other laptop, you already know exactly how to use an Express. In the final analysis, I encourage you to share this video with everyone you know who uses a computer, because this is a very real issue. Someday we'll look back and compare poor ergonomic habits to smoking cigarettes, a completely unhealthy and avoidable disaster. To learn more about the BulletTrain Express keyboard platform, please visit bullettrain.com and feel free to contact us with any questions by emailing help@bullettrain.com. Take care of your wrists and take care of yourselves.